it was just exciting to me. I thought it was, a tremendous adventure that would be like in the movies, where it was one-sided, where we'd do all the killing, and the Germans would they would be the bad guys would always lose, and we would always win. And it just didn't occur to me that these guys are going to be shooting back at us, and it was going to be, it could be the other way around.
Going into combat, I think most of the people that had been in from February 41 were relieved. We had been through so many training cycles that it was almost a relief to get in and put in action the things that you had been trained to do.
You thought that we'd go down into the boats and land, tack a position, and go up a hill and go into bivouac, and then go back to camp for a shower maybe that night. Now that's about the way it felt to me.
On the morning of June 6, 1944, the Allies launched the greatest amphibious assault the world has ever seen. For one of the initial assault divisions, the 29th, this was to be their first combat experience. Many men would die that first day. This film is about those men of the 29th who survived that hell on earth called Omaha Beach and fought on until Nazi Germany was destroyed. Our story begins on the eve of the invasion.
We had chicken and pie and ice cream on Sunday night, all the white bread we could eat and so forth, just like a man going to his last meal at the lecture chair.
The group I was with, mostly from headquarters, included the chaplain. I remember making a statement to him, Chaplain, I'm not ready for this. He says, what do you mean? I told him that just not ready for this, not morally, not physically, not anything. But he says, yeah, but you are.
I joined the National Guard. Now, this is a little irony here. I joined the National Guard in 1939 in order to go to the beach at Virginia Beach 2 weeks every year. I never got to Virginia Beach. I ended up on Omaha Beach.
We climbed down the nets on the side of these large ships into smaller boats, which they call landing craft vehicle and personnel. I think they held about 22 people each. And then we made our way in as a headquarters group toward the beach. And I can remember the running was pretty heavy. Instead of going straight in as we expected to do, we went up and down a little bit. People started to get seasick on the boat.
As we got closer to the beach, you saw bodies floating. Most of them looked like to me were sailors. Then you got closer, then you saw the soldiers, the army personnel that was floating in the thing.
And bullets was flying everywhere. They were ricocheting off of that boat. And the next couple of men, Dick Wright, sergeant, communications sergeant, he was killed as he went off. As I come my turn, the sea was rough and the boat reared up, and I caught my heel or something and went off the side of the boat, went off the side of the ramp. And when I come up, immediately that radio and all that weight took me down. When I come up, I was in water up close to my neck, and I was away from the boat a little bit. But I could, first thing I looked back and seeing that everybody was being cut down just fast as they come off. So I stayed away from the boat. In a few minutes, I heard Zappa Costa holler he was hit bad. And the medic tried to make it over to him, and he went down and didn't come up. He later washed up on the beach the next day, I think, or that day sometime later. I knew he was in serious trouble. Nobody, till this day, have I found that got off that boat alive but me.
Absolute total confusion. There was ships all over the place, bodies all over the place. Apparently they had tried to get some armor vehicles in, and they were just all blued up on the side. But we finally got them, ran across the beach. It must have been the longest 150 yards I ever ran in my life. I never thought I'd ever get to the seawall. like I kept on running and running and running and running and was getting nowhere.
I told him, I said, Tommy, move up. He said, okay. And just as he said, okay, plop, I hit it, just like you shoot into a paper. Just like you take a stone and throw it to a paper stack, you know, lined up, a hollow piece, no, a piece of newspaper. That's how it sounds. And I happened to look, in the meantime, I was almost on top of him, really. His brain splattered back on my collar, side of my helmet, side of my cheek. So then we started moving up. I looked, I said, well, can you help him? He was gone. He just...
Sergeant Patterson kept urging us to go on. Come on, keep going. So you've got to get off the shore. So I had no desire. I just happened to stay right there, but I knew I had to. So eventually I summoned enough courage. So I jumped up and went ahead a few feet and fell another deployment.
Off in the distance, towards Dog Green Beach, I could see a heavy dust or smoke that covered that beach, and that was A Company landing over there, getting torn to pieces. I guess a lot of people think an officer has no feelings, but I can assure you he does. And I guess I was in shock for I don't know how many days after that.
By mid-morning on D-Day, the situation was critical on Omaha Beach. General Omar Bradley, commander of U.S. forces, considered abandoning the beach. However, something miraculous was happening on Omaha Beach. Leaderless, separated from their units, individual GIs were forming into assault teams. By that afternoon, soldiers were getting off the beach and moving inland.
I think I was the first one in my group to cross the beach. I'd laid there and debated, you know, when to go. Should I take my all this equipment across, you know, or should I go without the equipment? So I elected to try to make it with the equipment. So I left my assault jacket on. I had my rifle, and I had a couple of bandoliers of ammunition. And I told my squad, and I told Fats, I said, I'm going across. I says, come behind me. And so I started across, and I was bent over as low as I could get, and I was running as fast as I could run. And you can imagine, soaking wet, my shoes full of water, leggings, everything just soaked, and carrying all this equipment. And I mean, I was lumbering across that beach. I got across the beach to the seawall, and I looked back, and I saw Fats was right behind me, and so was Al Gary. In fact, all of them came right behind me.
We went on up to the top of the hill, and it was barbed wire strung, you know, single strands, and it had the Octoon mine. Well, we didn't know whether to go across the field or not. But Colonel Cannon come on up, and he was trying to get the fellows together, you know, so we would have a fighting force. And he went across the field, and I thought to myself, that if he can go across that field, he's an older man than I am, I can do it too.
I heard a tank coming from the east in our direction. And I looked, and in the distance, I saw it. And at first, I thought, well, this is a German tank. And this thing has been a failure, and they've come in to mop up. And that wasn't a very pleasant thought to me. I didn't relish being taken a prisoner. But that tank came on. It had a very beautiful white star on the front. It was ours.
Wasn't supposed to be any resistance at Omaha either. Not too much resistance. But it looked like we ran into just about everything they had at that point. And I'm pretty sure they had much more than what they had there, but fortunately they didn't use it. I don't know what would have happened. I guess it would have turned the world around if they'd had more there, perhaps. Of course, that's, you know, didn't work that way, fortunately.
After securing the beachhead, U.S. forces had to slug their way through Normandy's hedgerow country. These ancient earthen structures provided excellent cover for the Germans to fight a defensive holding action. It was 6 long weeks before the Americans broke free of the hedgerows. Over 1,600 29ers died in these Norman fields.
Well, every time I climbed over a hedgerow, that was a traumatic experience. Every step that I took the first 10 days in Normandy was a traumatic experience, because you didn't know whether you was going to step on a mine, you didn't know what a sniper was going to get you, you didn't know what you were going to get cut in half with a machine gun, mortars dropping in on you.
Firing was heavy all of a sudden. Our own anti-aircraft had to press their guns where it was going above our heads, and it was scary. So I couldn't stand it. You know, when you're like that, you want to urinate. You know, it's hard to control your kidneys and all. So I got out of the hole. I couldn't stand any longer. Rushed over to the clearing station, and just to do something. And it was a Captain Chalemi, a doctor, was working on a guy. He had been a mine casualty. He had walked over a mine, and he says, "Come on, you want to help?" I said, "Sure." So he says, "Take his shoe off." I think that finished me. I took his shoe off along with his foot.
Seems that all our casualties in that assault were fatal. And it caused us to, or me to think, here we had gotten through D-Day, and we thought that we were survivors, but we're finding that more battles, we get more casualties, and our E Company group was getting smaller and smaller, so that more responsibility on each one of us. So it gave you a rather depressing feeling that it's not a matter of whether or not you get through, but when you get wounded.
When I landed, to me, this was one of the greatest things in the world. Something we'd been living with and training for a long period of time. And it was just something that none of us who were there would have missed for anything. At least that's how I felt about it. And it didn't bother me at all for, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks. And then all of a sudden one day, my gosh, they're playing for keeps. And then I began to be concerned about my own personal welfare. But, and you get a feeling, I can't explain it to you, but it's always there. Something in the pit of your stomach, in the middle of your back, but it just affects you.
I was sitting in a hole with this boy, and a mortar dropped in close by, and we wasn't laying down in the hole, we were just sitting up one in each end. And a shell fragment hit him in his jugular, and he just bled to death. I mean, wasn't nothing I could do about it. I couldn't help him. And that really got the best of me right there.
My best friend got killed, and I was moping around the next day, and this first sergeant said, "Don't go moping around, don't have wakes in the Army."
We stopped, and it was on a weekend and on a Sunday, and was digging in around a little church over in France, and we had to make guys stand on guard because everybody wanted to go to church for some reason or another. A whole bunch wanted to go all at one time. And to keep somebody on guard while we was in church, we had to make the people do that. That's how anxious the guys was to get in the Church of God, because they felt like that would be the only safe place they could be. I know I felt that way, and I'm sure most of them did the same thing. But it's awful funny to see everybody in church with hand grenades hanging all over them, rifle grenades on them, and bandoliers of ammunition, and your guns in your hand. But that's the way it was.
Just before St. Lo, I was up in the front lines, and the chaplain, the battalion chaplain, I saw him rolling into my foxhole, and I didn't know what in the world was the chaplain doing up there. You know, it's hot as heck, and so he started explaining to me that my father had died, and he had some bad news that my father had died back in May. This was in July, and that he had I didn't even know my father was sick. He had an aneurysm develop. He was only 48 or 9 years old, but they'd sent him to University of Virginia Hospital, and they cut him open. So I saw he had an aneurysm, and they just closed him back up, and he died. You know, they didn't have any operation for that. And so he said there was no way that he was going to survive, and that he was much better off dead and so forth. And he said, "I wish we could send you back and give you a rest, but we need every man we can get." And so I had already lost so many of my buddies and so forth that it just didn't. My father, it didn't register that much. You get to a point where death and dying is you accept it, and that's it. You just don't think about it. So I told him, "No, I'm fine. I'm all right. I don't want to go back. I'll be all right." So that was it. That was that. And it didn't really dawn on me that my father had died, and I never would see him again until later on, maybe in the rest area or somewhere. I finally decided or realized then that I was never going to see my father again. And he's the one that took me to the train station when I went overseas. When I went in the National Guard, when we were inducted, he took me in the car to the train station. My mother didn't go with us because we only had a two-seated car, and he let me out. And of course, we hugged, and he told me to take care of myself, and that was the last time I saw him.
I aimed the BAR at those guys standing there working at the machine gun nest. It's not really clear, but it seemed like they'd be working around there, and all of a sudden they'd slump over. It didn't make much sense to me. I couldn't comprehend what I was doing. That there was any relationship between the fact that I was firing the BAR and the fact that they were dropping. It just didn't come together. The important thing was that we did neutralize that machine gun nest, and it was what helped us get started on the road to St. Lo.
The capture of St. Lo, the important rail and communication hub of the Cotantan Peninsula, was an essential element in the American plan to break out of the hedgerow country. The 29th spearheaded the capture of St. Lo.
In front of St. Lo, the artillery fire became somewhat intense, and we had to get all the Red Cross markings away because it seemed to be maybe that's what attracted fire, because they figured if you had a medical company there, there was infantry around.
We couldn't go very far because of the tremendous amount of damage from the bombardment, both by air and artillery, had demolished the buildings, and there was debris 3 to 5 feet in all the streets. We just stayed in the city proper, right around the square. And since we couldn't move the vehicles out, we scattered them around the square any place we could to disperse them. And we dismounted everybody and made up small groups of 4 or 5 men to move out to secure the area, sort of outpost it, and continue to move. We picked up a few prisoners, some of them in the cellars and that sort of thing. We dug them out. And then as the infantry came in, of course, they expanded it further and further, and eventually we had a pretty good setup.
One of the things that I'll never forget is seeing that group of men that had been up in that line since D-Day, marching back down the road, back to the rest. They were ragged, filthy, dirty, emaciated. They looked, their eyes sunk in the back of their heads, awful looking, just dust and dirt all over them, ragged pants, and to see them going back, and they were just whipped. I mean, just tired and just awful looking. You wouldn't believe it. And of course, after we got back to the rear, it's an entirely different world back there. You go back and where everybody is, you can walk standing up straight. You you're clean, you're shaven, your hair's cut, you've got clean uniforms. You can go to the movies, you get hot meals, and all the things that a civilized human being gets.
After St. Lo, the 29th moved on to the Brittany Peninsula and assisted in the capture of the port city of Brest. After Brest, the 29th moved rapidly across France. Resistance began to toughen as the 29th crossed into Germany.
We started our attack across the North German plains from a little town called Alsdorf, and it was just as flat as this floor. And little villages scattered hither, thither, and yon, maybe a half to 3/4 of a mile apart across the plain. It was all agricultural area. But the Germans had organized these villages, and they had set up systems of mutual support with the artillery or whatever mortars that they have in one town. If you'd attack one, or 3 or 4 of them would fire to provide support for that. And this was tough fighting for the infantry primarily. The infantry really took it on the nose.
After I got wounded, I'm laying in the hospital over there. They left me on the stretcher. I was so far gone that they figured I wasn't going to last but a little while, and they never did take me off the stretcher. And while I'm laying there, there's a German laying next to me. And I didn't know it, but they had cut my stomach open, and my intestines was laying out on top of me, part of them, and they had them covered up with a wet towel. And I told this nurse come by, I said, that German over there done crapped in the bed. And she looked at me and laughed, said, it ain't him, it's you. And the holes where this bullet went into me and my rib punctured some holes in my intestines, that's when they had to take them out to patch these holes up. And I was laying there, and I was 2/3 dead, because I was miserable. And while I'm laying there, all of a sudden, it's just like I'm sitting here talking to you guys. Something come to me and said, you're not going to die, you're going to get well. Just like that. And I called this nurse over, and I told her, you tell that doctor if he's waiting for me to die, just forget it, because I'm not going to die. She said, what do you mean? I said, I mean what I said, I'm not going to die. And for some reason, I knew I wasn't going to die. So she went and got the doctor, and he come in and said, what's this I hear about you're not going to die? I said, well, if you're waiting for me to die, just forget it. I said, time you to do something for me. And from then on, he grabbed me and took me into an operating room. They started putting my intestines back in and sewed me back up and shipped me over to England, and here I am.
We were on a move this side of the Ruhr in an open beet field. And the enemy had us cornered. They were wiping us out like mad. I had a company at that time, had replacements, of about 170 people, and 96 of them got killed. Now, we finally reached our objective, and 2 days later, I had to go back and take a man with me to identify the bodies. And that is the greatest moment of my life. 96 of our people. Some of our officers and men that I knew, but that was my feeling right there.
Resistance began to crumble after the failure of the Germans' Ardennes offensive. The 29th had crossed the Ruhr River and was on its way to a meeting with the Russians at the Elbe River.
I was more afraid the last 2 days than I was when I went on the beach, because I knew that the climax of the conflict was coming to an end, because everything pointed to that direction. And I had a fear that I'd become a casualty in the last seconds or the last hour of battle. And that really set me off and really preyed on my mind for a long, long time after that.
When we were in service, we were in for the length of time of the war. There was no such thing as rotation or a year back or so. And that's the thing that bugged me most was we were away by that time almost 3 years, and we wondered when we were going to get home. It was a long time to be away, a long part of your life that was non-productive.
And when they told me that I was going, it didn't take me but just a few minutes to pack up, and I left, and I was trying to, I had a watch I'd been carrying for many months. When I got promoted, I guess, to section sergeant, they gave me a watch. That was one of the perks. and it was an old Elgin. It wasn't a very expensive watch, but it was a GI watch, and I wanted to take it home with me. I thought I'd earned the right to have it. And so I was getting ready to leave the company area, and I hadn't told anybody goodbye. I was just wanted to get the heck away from there and forget about the Army. And the supply sergeant came running out of the supply tent, and he says, "I got to have that watch." I said, "You got to be kidding." I said, "That's my watch." He said, "Nope, I got to have it." And he took that watch off my arm, and that was it. He wouldn't even let me have my watch. So I walked away from there without anything.
Then I was discharged. I got sight back in one eye and come on home. And I lived a very productive life, I guess, through the years. Never had any children till 8 years ago. Had a son born. And the next reunion we had after that, I laid claim to the title of having the last child born to a B Company member of World War II. Until this time, nobody has ever contested that.